It's so scary how close we are to the end of Full House because All Stood Up is the 22nd episode of season 8. This is actually the last one they filmed. It's not the last one to air. The next 2 episodes are actually a 2-parter finale, but they filmed that one before this one, and I found that to be quite interesting. This is directed by Joel Zwick, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the narrative and share some thoughts. And it starts off with DJ and Michelle playing jacks, and they're competing. Whoever picks up the most jacks will get out of doing the dishes, and of course DJ wins, so Michelle has to do chores. And throughout the episode, Michelle wants to get back at DJ, and she wants to find something that she can do that DJ is maybe not as good at. And she starts off with hula hooping, but DJ is good at that. And then Nicky and Alex actually help Michelle by setting up limbo. And yeah, because, well, Michelle's much lower down to the ground. Michelle is better at limbo, and she finally found something. And I thought it was really sweet. It's a nice way to include those characters in the story. We then come to Jesse's part of the narrative. Jesse's blood pressure is a little bit high, so he's told that he has to relax. So he puts up a hammock in the yard while Kimmy is playing the bagpipes. I'm Scottish. I'm supposed to love the bagpipes, and I do. I really like the sound of bagpipes, but I do think there is a place and a time. And while Kimmy is entitled to practice, I don't think this is the right place or the right time for Jesse. And he decides, instead of relaxing, he's going to get his own back. And he sets up this giant speaker and starts to play really loud sounds. And it just made me think how awful it must be to be their neighbour at that point. And it's war between them. And then, even for Kimmy, it gets a little strange. And if I said to you, what do you think happens next, if you'd never seen this episode before, I would put very good money on nobody guessing what happens next. Because Kimmy gets an ostrich. She borrows an ostrich. It's absolutely crazy. And this is war completely. Jesse has decided his next move is to build a wall, and he ropes Joey in. And yeah, it's a decent part of the narrative. Again, another nice way to bring in those characters. I thought it was really good fun, and probably not the best way for Jesse to be relaxing. But I enjoyed it. It was chaotic. Kimmy was fabulous and unpredictable, and it's really good fun. And then we come to Stephanie. And Stephanie manages to work up the courage to ask Ryan to the dance. Ryan is played by Andrew Keegan. And she babbles a bit, but he says yes. And then he stands her up. She's at the house. She's all ready to go. And she panics when he's not there on the hour at the time they agreed. And yeah, I think it's fair that he could be running a little late, but then time passes. And the way we see the passage of time is with Stephanie sitting down on the sofa, building with these building blocks, and then it cuts to more building blocks and even more building blocks, and it's very clear she's been sitting there a really long time. And it's heartbreaking, it really is. She'll bounce back from it, it's not a big deal at the end of the day, but in the moment, that rejection, that abandonment, that's really going to hurt. And she goes to school, obviously wanting to not think about it, and Danny happens to go to her school to drop off some spam for the canned food drive, and he sees Ryan. I will admit this was a little hard to believe, because he only knows this is Ryan because he heard another kid call him Ryan. But I'm sure there'll be more than one Ryan in the school, so you need to suspend disbelief a little bit, because Danny just assumed that there was only one Ryan and that this was this Ryan, but obviously it was this Ryan. And he talks with Ryan, and he says to Ryan, and I quote, "It broke my heart to see the tears in her eyes." That's not a good move, Danny. I know he's coming from a good place. He's coming from a place of love. But at the same time, you don't want to tell a teenage boy that he made a girl cry, particularly when they're not in a relationship, they haven't been dating, it was just a random ask out to a dance. It's not exactly the right thing for Danny to say. But nevertheless, we move on from this scene, and Stephanie is overjoyed. Ryan apologised to her. He said he'd take her to the mall for pizza. And then she finds out that Danny was the one who talked to him and basically made him do this. And she decides that she's going to stand up to Ryan. Since he clearly doesn't want to do this, he's just doing it because of Danny, she's going to stand Ryan up instead. And my immediate thought was, yeah, that's probably not the best, because you're treating somebody the way that they treated you, but two wrongs don't make a right. And hurting them makes you just as bad as they were when they hurt you. I forgot to mention the reason he stood her up is because him and some of the guys, they decided to just do something else instead. And yet today this would play out differently. I hope he would just send her a quick text and just say, change of plans, this will play out differently today. I'd hope he'd at least text her. That's not the best communication, but it's better than no communication. But obviously at the time, not going to be the case. And yeah, she stands him up. And Ryan comes over to her house to say, where were you? I waited for you. And they talk it out, and they both agree to just go out and be friends and have a good time. And this is where it gets emotional, because Stephanie leaves, and then she comes back in and she hugs Danny, and it's emotional, and she says all of the right things, and it's a really beautiful moment and a really lovely way to end the episode. But what's really, I'm getting emotional talking about it, what's really moving is that this is the last episode, this is the ending, this is the last thing they're filming. But what's really moving, and I wouldn't have picked up on this, but Jodie Sweetin mentions in her book, Unsweetened, that this was the last film she seen. I'm going to try that one again. This is the last scene she filmed. But the first scene she filmed was also at the doorstep, and it just kind of mirrors her, and it's it's beautiful. I'm not looking forward to watching the next two episodes, because it's brilliant. I don't want it to end. Personal highlights from this episode, I'd say how things concluded with Stephanie and Danny, not just because of how moving and emotional it is, but just in general. I think it was very well executed. Kimmy, always a delight, particularly so in this episode, and it's nice to see DJ and Michelle interacting and having fun and involving Nicky and Alex. So in general, I think I'd say all stood up. It's a pretty decent episode of Full House.